Welcome back to another episode of In the Foxhole. I'm your host, JC Chanowski.
And I'm Angela Schroeder.
Good afternoon, Angela. How are you?
I'm great.
I am excited today because we're going to learn a little bit, actually a lot of it probably, about Victor Rancour. I've been following Victor since I joined Apex a little over a year and a half ago, maybe almost 2 years now. Some explosive growth, doing a lot of great things in his industry, putting on some great events. So I'm excited, Victor. Thank you so much for coming out today and talking to us and our audience.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me on. And, hopefully we can get some good information out that could help some people, man. That's what it's all about, right?
Absolutely. Transparency is key, being vulnerable, humble. It's a couple of things we'd like to be talking about throughout the show. But Victor, I don't know a whole lot about you, and I'm sure some of our audience doesn't as well. So if you would, just tell us about Victor, what you've been doing, a little bit about your past and where you're going.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the story keeps getting longer and longer as the years go by, right? So, obviously, I was just like anybody else. I mean, I barely graduated high school, really had no direction going through my 20s. About 11 years ago, I found myself in a pretty sticky situation in California. Had no direction, didn't know what I was going to do. And I ended up packing up my stuff and moving out to my family members out in Cleveland, Ohio. I spent a year there, and that's kind of where I got to kind of grow up, right? Because I left mom and dad. Like my mom and dad, my parents got divorced, and it was like a big mess going on there. But I was like, always living off my parents for a while. And finally, there's the first time I was like, hey, I'm on my own. I got to figure shit out. And I ended up getting a job at an oil change place, making like $6 an hour in Cleveland, Ohio. So it's kind of about as rock bottom as you can get. But I worked there that's where I kind of learned sales and kind of fell in love with the art of kind of like not upselling, but like, merchandising, right? Like finding their needs and filling their needs. Right. And I became very good at that. And I used those skills for, once I got back to California, I moved back to California after about a year working in Cleveland, doing oil changes, getting oil splattered on my face every day. Got back to California. And then from there, I just, I worked a bunch of random odd jobs. And one day I ended up looking on Craigslist, and I was looking for a job. And sure enough, the Craigslist ad said, hey, we're going to teach you how to be an HVAC technician. I had no idea what HVAC stood for. This is February 2015. I applied at the company. I went to the interview. Like I only got the job, I think, because I was the only one that showed up in a suit. Everybody else was wearing like t-shirt and hats to this interview to be a technician, right? Like I didn't know what the hell a technician was. I just showed up like I would to any interview, right? Went to that interview, ended up getting the job, and very quickly fell in love with sales and fell in love with the home service industry. And so I worked my way up through that company, ended up becoming the number one selling technician in the country for HVAC in 2016, and then transitioned into being a salesman, a comfort advisor. So going behind technicians, running leads, running like no charge estimates, stuff like that. Cut my teeth doing that, ended up becoming the number one sales guy in the country for HVAC, for estimate side. And then from there, I ended up getting recruited from another local competitor. And that's kind of where my whole kind of fate changed. I thought I was just going to be a sales guy forever. I was really good at it. I was, making well over $500,000 a year selling air conditioning. And I'm like, I didn't think I was going to go anywhere. And this guy, I went to breakfast with him. He gives me an offer. He says, hey, I'm going to give you this big old signing bonus. I'm going to take you and your family out to Hawaii. He put us up on the North Shore of Hawaii for like a week and a half. Wined us and dined us, gave us his money. And he's like, hey, I want you to run my business in SoCal. Because he's living in Hawaii. He wants me to run my business out there. So that's where I got to cut my teeth at the inside of a business, the operation side, and got to see all the back end stuff, the stuff that I never saw. I just sold the job and somehow it got installed and they paid me. And now I got to be, now I'm the service manager, the sales manager. I'm helping with operations. I'm helping with marketing. So I got to really understand the entire business. And I did that for about 9 months until August 2018. I started my first business. Kind of had an entrepreneurial seizure. Didn't plan on starting a business. Came up with the idea. 5 days later, I started a business. And the only way I knew how to get customers, I texted every single person in my entire phone. Hey, I started an AC business. If anybody needs anything. And sure enough, I started getting texts back. Hey, I got this going on. I got this going on. And we ended up selling our first job. Like day one, I sold a job to a guy in my fantasy football league. I didn't know him. He's a buddy of mine. It was his fantasy league they brought me into. Some random guys like, hey, come out, my AC's not working. I ended up selling him a new AC. And I guess the rest is history, man. We grew really fast. We got recognized as the fastest growing HVAC company in the country. So we grew we did 1 million our first 4 months of business from August till January. And then the first year was 5 million, then 12 million. And then we just kept growing and growing. And then I exited this year in June. We had done about 65 million in total revenue over the 4.5 years.
Congrats. That's incredible.
We haven't heard somebody use that term yet. Entrepreneur seizure.
Yeah, like
starting a business. And I think that happens for a lot of people starting a business. It's just like, whoa, what happened? I thought it one day and
we always think it's our boss is making all the money and this shit's easy, and then you realize that he ain't making shit and this shit's hard. And that's kind of what happened, man. And like, I didn't know nothing about starting a business. I didn't know how to set up an LLC. I didn't know how to do any of this shit. And it's like, when you go from like the easy thing is selling shit's easy, man. I sell it, I don't got to think about it anymore. It's done. Now you sell it, you got to install, you got to deal with the customers, you got to make sure everybody's happy. Now you're dealing with employees and payroll tax and gas, and God, it's a nightmare. But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't trade it for the world, but it was definitely a shock going from like, so anytime a sales guy or someone's like, yeah, I'm going to go start my own business. I'm like, good luck, buddy. See you next year when you need help.
So you found your calling though when you got the HVAC. I mean, jumping up to the number one, you said salesman in the first year or technician. I mean, and then doing it again on the other side. I mean, that's incredible.
Yeah. So like I said, what I did when I first got into it, first off, I didn't know how much money was in the trades. Right. And I thought 60 grand a year to me was a lot of money at the time. So I'm like, dude, 60 grand a year. I never made 60 grand a year. My first calendar year, we made like 120,000 as a tech. So like we moved up, like I was able to make money really fast. But like once they showed me, I still remember the day they showed me the pay plan. I called my girl. I'm like, you're never gonna have to work a day in your life again. And I'm like, we don't believe what they're gonna pay me to do this shit. And so I just dedicated everything to it, man. I didn't do anything else. Like I went to work, like I wasn't like no one, they probably thought I was a mute or something because I didn't talk to nobody. I didn't fuck with nobody. I just went to work, did my shit, went home, and I studied all fucking night, watching YouTube videos, repeating like word tracks and stuff like that until I got good at it. And then I only hung around with the people that were the best. Like if you weren't like the top of the top, I didn't fuck with you. Like I was so like narrowly focused on one thing only, because I found out real quick that some of the top guys were making 500,000 a year, and I'm like, if they're doing, I want to figure out what the fuck they're doing. So I'm like, I'm gonna go hang out with those guys, and so that's what I did. I just surrounded myself with the winners and didn't really bother with anything else.
That's a great concept. I mean, that's how to get better. I mean, you just put your nose down and, like you said, studied so that you really knew what you were doing, and then hung out with the people that were doing it well. And even though, I mean, sales, it's great that you started out in that. And I think lots of entrepreneurs have that sales spirit because that's what you have to do to drive the business, right? You can know all the back end and everything, but if you can't go sell your way out of something as a business owner,
well, I have a belief that every single business, there's three parts of the business, but every single business is sales and marketing. If you can't get sales and marketing down, you're never going to have a business. Your business is never going to grow. You're never going to succeed. So, a lot of people like they're so scared of sales, and I'm like, dude, you got to sell. Like if you can't sell, don't even bother starting a business, because if you don't believe in yourself enough to sell whatever product you're selling, you're going to have a hard time.
I love your journey throughout. I mean, everyone has a different journey, and we are always going to remember that. Entrepreneur seizure. Well, but why don't you tell us, before we dive into some of the obstacles you've had along the way, what's a win you're celebrating right now in your business or in your life?
Obviously I'm still celebrating my exit, man. It's, as you grow a business, if anybody's ever grown anything of significance, right, you have to put everything into it. And everything else has to fall to the wayside, whether it's family, friends, vacations, a lot of stuff, man. And for me, I put my head down for 4.5 years. And I said from day one, I wanted to build the biggest and best company in Southern California. And we did it. But, along the way, you burn a lot of bridges. You burn a lot of I woke up today. I'm like, I don't have none of the same friends I had 4.5 years ago, because I went like this. I put my fucking blinders on and I was determined to build this great business, build this big business, that I just kind of burnt everything around me. And I was just joking. I'm like, I got a brand new snowboard for the last 3 years. I haven't even went snowboarding. And I love snowboarding. I love surfing. I love doing these things. And I'm like, I haven't done any of it. So I think my big win is that I'm scheduling it to do all these things that I put off for the last couple of years. So we're heading out to Utah. I get to go snowboarding with Sean White next week, so that's gonna be pretty cool. So it's so like stuff.
Way to break
yeah. So like I'm finally getting to do some cool stuff and be able to relax and take my kids to the beach and do that stuff. So I think that's my win, is that it's finally slowing down a little bit.
Awesome. I'm sure your family appreciates that as well.
Yeah, definitely. So, but yeah, I think that would be my win. I mean, I definitely, we could talk about a lot of the losses. That's for damn sure. Cause and you don't get to grow anything of significance without failure. That's for sure.
Oh, absolutely. And that's the part about being transparent and open about it too. Because, again, it doesn't matter what industry you're in, you're going to go through your obstacles, you're going to go through your hurdles, but there's always light at the end of the tunnel. So speaking of that, Victor, I mean, you talked about some incredible feats over there. The beginning you talked about your early on, and I always said I was going nowhere fast when I was young. I was doing all the right thing or all the wrong things. Like just everything was just wrong, wrong, wrong. And I had to do a 180 myself. But let's talk about some of those foxhole moments, Victor, when you're ready to just call it quits, and who was there for you, and what was the lesson that you learned, and how you're able to apply that to yourself today, or help others not have the same mistake that you did.
I mean, I think that that's one of my driving things. Like one of my things that pushes me, my why every day, is making sure a lot of people have to go through the same struggles I went through. I mean, obviously, growing a business and not understanding anything about business, I knew sales. Right. I knew how to motivate people. I knew how to attract talent. I knew how to do all these things, but I didn't understand business that well. Right. So you don't understand how everything correlates. And if you're anything like any sales guy on the planet, like, what do? We get money, we buy more shit. And so what if, like, it just is what it is. We just keep going, and I keep going. I quit my job making a lot of money, and I went from a bunch of money to nothing. And I still had the nice Mercedes. I still had all the car payments and all these things I had to pay for. So you got to hustle your ass off. So I think so 2018, last 4 months, we did $1 million. Then we did 5 million in 2019. Then going into 2020, obviously COVID hit. We thought, shit was hitting the fan then. Obviously my business is only like 14, 15 months old. And when all of a sudden the phones went to nothing and my employees were like, we're not working, you got to pay us. So that was interesting. And so I went from having like 35 employees or something like that time. And I'm answering all the phone calls and running all the calls. So that was interesting. But then obviously most home service businesses took off during COVID, mine included. So we grew really fast. And towards the end of COVID, my ego had got so big. Like I thought I had the Midas touch. Whatever I touched was going to turn to gold. Didn't matter what it was. And buddy of mine came to me with an acquisition idea. And he's like, hey, I got this company that's about, it's like 2 hours away from me. It's in Palm Springs area. And I'm in Orange County. So it's about a 2 hour drive. He's like, it's business for sale. It's been around for a long time. I'm like, well, I want it. And he's like, well, I think it's a little bit overpriced. I'm like, well, whatever it is, just get the deal done. Whatever it's going to take to get the deal done. I'm like, if I buy that business, we're going to blow it up. And so my team went through all the due diligence process, do all the stuff through this. We went to do an SBA, and taking a loan on it. And I still remember driving out there, and I was on my way out to finalize this acquisition. And everything in my body says, turn the fuck around and go back. And I was like, you know what? I'm not going to, I'm like, it'll be fine. I'll figure it out. So end up buying this business in December 2020. And I bought it for $3.2 million, and I shut it down 8 months later. And that was probably something that would have probably bankrupted or crippled anybody. But as soon as we bought that business, everything that can go wrong went wrong. From my stuff I had going on in my main business to this operating business to everybody quitting. And now it's 2 hours away. So I'm driving out there 2 hours a day, 2 hours each way to go do interviews, and people aren't showing up to interviews. I can't get anybody to show up. And I'm like, I got this great business over here, and I got this one that's a fucking dumpster fire over here. And I'm like, and I'm paying the SBA $32,000 a month on this loan. So I'm already cutting a check every month for $32,000. On top of that, operating costs and all this stuff, and we're bleeding. I'm bleeding probably like $60,000 a month on this business. And so by June or July, I'm like, dude, what do I do? Like, and I'm sitting there, and one of my buddies happened to be in town. His name is Bill Pulte. I'm not sure if you ever heard of Pulte Homes, but he's a 34-year-old billionaire sitting in my office. And he's like, what are you doing? I'm like, dude, I'm stressed. I got this going on. He's like, when you got cancer, what do you fucking do? I'm like, you cut it out. He's like, yeah, take that motherfucker out back and shoot it in the fucking head. I'm like, but it's $32,000 a month. He's like, yeah, or you can lose $60,000 a month. Which one do you want to do? And so within 24 hours, I went home that night. I was definitely crying because our cash position had got to shit. Like, we were like, dude, like my accountant's like, dude, we got probably 3 to 4 weeks of cash flow left before we like burn this thing down. So I'm like, okay, I got to make a decision now. I said, sitting at home that night crying to myself. And then, I had 100 and something employees, I think 120 employees, and I was going to fire 50 of them the next day. And so I went through my org chart, went through every single position. I went through every fucking thing I could think of and said, how can I operate this business with less people? And I went through it because I didn't want to do what would be like fire 5 people here, then 10 people here, like death by a million cuts, because then you lose confidence. So it's already like, am I going to be next? And people don't want to work type of deal. So like, okay, I got to cut everybody at once. So I went to the org chart that night, and I had to circle some people that, I promised them jobs. I told them I was going to take care of them and take care of their family. And I got to circle their fucking name and tell them I got to fire them the next day. So went through that, just made my decision, made that cut. And, obviously beyond the fact of having to tell employees that depend on you, that you got to let them go. You also just the negative effect that has on your business, right? Because I am like my industry and my neighborhood, I'm public enemy number one. Like nobody likes me because I'm taking all their customers and taking all their employees, right? So when you go make a cut like that, everybody hears about it, everybody talks about it, and so you had to deal with the ego getting shot in the head, and then obviously taking those losses. So I think that was probably one of the toughest parts of my life. But once I made that decision, I cut it. I told myself I'm never going to make this mistake again. I'll never let myself get bloated. I'll never let myself make a bad business decision again. So I definitely learned from it. But it definitely cost me, I would say it cost me beyond the $3.2 million. It probably cost me just in valuation. It probably cost me $25 to $30 million in loss. So it sucked, but it is what it is.
Wow. That is a big one. And to live with too, like you knew going into signing that, like something in your body said, telling you it wasn't good. But what a great lesson. You did that once, you made a decision that didn't feel right once, but once you got that advice from someone that you respected, it didn't take you weeks, months to keep bleeding and keep going down the rabbit hole. You made a decision and acted on it immediately. So even though you've gotten yourself in a bad place, you made a rapid pivot.
Yeah. And that's the key to success, right? And, there's so many, it's like failing forward, right? Then I was on my podcast the other day and I was talking to a guy. He went from being a comedian to now he's running a huge AI software company, which is kind of weird. And he's just like, man, he's like, I just kept taking opportunities and missing. He's like, miss and miss and miss. And no one really saw those, but I kept going forward. And he's like, as soon as I knew it was a bad idea, I cut it and moved on to the next one. He's like, but I came up with 10 ideas faster than anybody else came up with one. So if I failed on 4 of them and hit on 6 of them, that means I'm 6 ideas ahead of somebody else. And that's how you have to look at failure. Is like, you can either dwell on it or you can keep moving forward, and that's not my only failure in business. I've had multiple failures. I've done some other acquisitions that didn't work out. I've had an event last year that fucking lost $1.2 million. So it's stuff like that where it's like, fuck, like, what are you doing? But it's all a wake up call, right? It's all just like, okay, let's reel it back in. Let's really figure out what caused this thing and then make sure it doesn't happen again.
So, I mean, obviously you're in the height of COVID along with everybody else, and we're all struggling as it was. Most small service business, they were able to, once they cut lifting some restrictions, were able to flourish. I mean, our Washington business was actually really good in our crystal light industry business. We had growth on both of them during that. But I'm sure that was real gut wrenching to go through COVID, lose all that. And then, like you said, lose all the 50 employees that you had to say goodbye. What was the really, like, who was there for you to, other than, what did you say his name was? The guy that
Pulte. Yeah. I mean, I had some good friends that, are in my corner and stuff. And, a lot of times, like when you're successful and when, like, I put myself out there a lot, right. And you're real public about it. You have to really minimize the people that know your failures, because there's, just like you you think everybody's your friends, but there's always someone trying to fuck you. So you got to be really like mindful of, I had to be really mindful of that stuff too. Cause it's like, it's part of my business as my personal brand too. So you have to make sure you protect that as well. And then limit, I got ahead of it, right? Like, instead of someone being able to come out and say, oh, this guy had to cut 50 people, I said, hey, I went and started talking about it anyways and say, hey, look, I fucked up and blah, blah. So I can kind of get ahead of it. But yeah, it's definitely a dark place. And one of the things you'll find out, like when you're going through business and working with employees, you think that everybody in your business is irreplaceable, right? And you think that they're all your friends. And you'll find out really quickly that everybody's replaceable and nobody's really your friend, right? As soon as a paycheck stops, a lot of times they go away. And when it's even worse when you hire your own friends, because your friends, they feel like you owe them one. So then like they actually will disrespect you more than somebody else you don't know. So it was definitely a hard time. It was definitely challenging. I definitely didn't fuck with nobody. Like I just kind of went to work and went home and handled my shit. And I was very good at putting a poker face on and acting like everything was good, even when it's not, right? And like that's part of being a leader, right? Is not letting them know that you're in trouble. sometimes. So
exactly that. Even though, I mean, there's certain people that you got to have in your circle that you can let your guard down and be okay with. But like you said, for most people, for the public eye to be able to still have trust in you, your business, and your personal brand, and the rest of the team that you had remaining. You know, they've seen this big cut and are obviously have uneasy feelings, and you have to put that face on, like you said, to go and cast the vision again, that they believe that everything's okay.
Yeah, and you have to everything's all planned, and it's got to be calculated, right? When you make a cut, like when you make a decision like that, a business decision, you have to be really calculated on what you do. And I was very calculated on how we communicated, how we talked about it, what it was about, like why we had to cut those people. And it was receptive, right? Like, so, and we did, you know, from there we took off. Like, it was actually kind of crazy. We're doing the same revenue and same, you know, getting everything done the same way with less people. And I think that's something that I stress a lot with my clients now. Like, obviously doing coaching, I'm just like, man, you don't need all these people. I asked them, I said, hey, one of the first questions I always ask is like, do you need all these people? And then they give you 100 million different excuses on why they need everybody. And then I said, okay, perfect. Now, can you write down what every single one of these people does every day? Right. And then we write it down and we realize that there's so much overlap in their business. And then when I tell them, I said, look, do you want to make money or do you want to have friends? And a lot of times they say, well, I want to make money. I said, well, then you got to cut some of your friends. And that's kind of the reality to business, right? Is trying to figure out how to operate lean. And I think that's what that moment I realized. I'm like, hey, I really need to learn I need to really understand the operation. I really got to understand, you know, workflows and putting in SOPs and all that stuff. And once we did that, it streamlined everything. Everybody was happier at their job. They were more productive, and we made more money.
Victor, you know, I want to talk about some of your the way you were able to grow your business so fast, coming from a technician to sales to having no entrepreneurial experience to getting that seizure, starting your own business. I mean, that's explosive growth. That's not, you know, let's just try this out and see what happens. Like, you went from 1 to 5. Who was there when you were doing that, you know, teaching all these things, how to hire people, how to retain them, how to train them, all that other stuff? Because that's a lot to do in a very short amount of time and be very successful. You're on mute. Oh, yeah.
Somehow maybe hit the mute button on StreamYard. Can we ask you that?
There we go. There you
go. Yeah, I mean, obviously, you know, I didn't really have anybody to lean on the first couple of years. I just did whatever I felt was right. I did get the opportunity, and this can't be overlooked, is that I got an opportunity starting out to work at the biggest, best home service company in the country. They're almost $1 billion a year now. When I got there, they were running at a 35% EBITDA on like $28 million at that point. By the time I left, they were doing 80 million at 30% EBITDA. So this is a very, very well-run, very profitable, very successful business that I got to work for. And I also got to, you know, I worked through their training program. So I understood how they took people off the streets. They didn't hire technicians. They hired good people, and they hired communicators. And I got to see their process and see what they did. And see like how they set up their like all their stuff. So the entire time I was there, I didn't realize that I was learning what they were doing, but I pay attention to a lot of shit, and I got a very good memory of everything. So one of the things I'm able to do is, you know, kind of, it's R&D, right? Rob and duplicate. So we're able to take what they did that was successful and then make it in my own. And I think the one thing that I was able to do is that every business, you know, during that time was going super corporate because private equity was getting really heavy into our space. And because they were getting super corporate, you can work for them, or you can come work for me, who's like a fucking wild card. I'm 30 years old running this business, and we had strippers for freaking call center reps, like the place a little wild. And so we were able to because that's really what it was. The strippers got fired during COVID. So like the place is like crazy. So like, you know, it was just a young, exciting place. And I went and got the best sales guys in the country. You know, a lot of the guys that I worked with, a lot of the guys that came to work for me, I trained them at other organizations and help them move up fast, you know. And I think that was one of the things that because they trusted me and liked me, they ended up coming to work for me. And so I accumulated I was like 4 guys that at one point were the number one in the country, or had number one in the country months, like in the last 2 years. So I brought in some really killer sales guys, and everything else kind of worked itself out.
That's another one we're going to remember. Rob and duplicate. Is that what you said? That's a different kind of R&D, but Exactly. That can't be overlooked. Like you had an opportunity to get inside of a well-performing business. And I think that is an opportunity that a lot of people overlook, that we just dive in, many people in starting businesses. And we've certainly done that. Just dive in and figure the rest out later, not learn from someone first.
Yeah, and I think that's, a lot of people ask, like, how did I, all the stuff, I'm like, dude, all it was is I got lucky to be hired at the right place. If I would have just went work for some sideshow Bob guy and did a couple units a month or whatever it was, like, I would have never knew what I knew now. Like now it's like, it's kind of a cheat code. Like everybody's like, well, you've only been doing it for 8 years. How do you know all this shit? I'm like, dude, because I got a Harvard education from some of the places I got to work at. Like you guys, most people don't get the opportunities I did. And when I got them, I took them. So like, there's a lot of kids nowadays or younger entrepreneurs, right? I'm like, dude, sacrifice 2 years and go work for somebody that's doing what you want to do. Like you don't have to do it now. You'll be more successful. You have so much time. Everything's such a freaking rush. I'm like, you have so much time. Go take 2 years and be a mentor with somebody you really look up to, someone you want to be like. Yeah. I would much rather starve myself to death and work as a mentor with work with a mentor that I really want to be like or want to turn my life into, than go work at McDonald's or fucking flipping burgers for fucking $15 an hour. I would starve myself. I'd eat a cup of noodles and fucking go be around winners.
That's a great point of when, I mean, and you chose to do that, but exactly. People just dive in instead of like, how can I be mentored by the best and learn and absorb like a sponge? And you said you were lucky with the opportunity. You obviously earned it in the sales position and becoming a record-breaking salesperson, that people, were attracted to you and saw what you were doing. And, you had that very first opportunity and, like you said, studied, did everything you could to break records so that people were attracted to you.
Yeah, you have to put up, like, the numbers don't lie, right? Like you got to put them up, and it's like, there's a lot of guys that come on and they talk and they're like, they try to say something like, dude, I'm like, I've done everything. Like, I deal with there's a lot of gurus now, and a lot of these guys, they come up and, I'm like, dude, like I've already forgotten more than you fucking know. Like you're not even in a position to go fucking teach anybody anything. Like, first off, have you ever won an award for the number one sales? Well, no. I was okay. Well, you shouldn't be fucking teaching anybody until you're the best at that. And then they like, oh, I'm like, have you ever grown a business over $10 million? Well, no. Then why the fuck are you teaching people how to grow a business? And I think that's one of the biggest things I run into is like, people don't know, like they can't really fathom my story, because it's a little crazy, because now I own equity in 18 different businesses now nationwide. I'm partnering in a couple of software companies. I own a bunch of different HVAC companies, and people can't understand how it's possible at 35. And I've only been doing this for 8 years. And I'm like, dude, like I just keep going forward, man. Like I take every opportunity. Like I'm always like, a lot of these guys, they get so complacent. I'm like, dude, fuck that. I ain't trying to be complacent. Once you get the wave going, you got to ride that shit,
Mm-hmm. So how, you said you had a target on your back, and that's real easy, especially as you grow in the industry and people start looking at you and trying to figure out how you're doing it. You're taking over, you said, jobs and employees from these other companies. How were you able to get through all that? Because that's not easy when everybody's out to get you and bring you down, when you're trying to just be successful, take care of your family, and provide for your team.
Number one thing is always make sure you're doing the right thing, right? Like, and we've all made mistakes, right? But for the most part, I try to stay on my P's and Q's and make sure that, if I'm going to get caught slipping, ain't going to be that bad. So I definitely pay attention to that kind of stuff. But I mean, I find it funny. So like, I was like about a year and a half into business, and I'm in a parts house, and I'm in the parts house. I hear these guys talking about this guy's taking all their work, and they're like, yeah, this motherfucker, he's taking all the employees, all this shit. I'm listening. I'm just standing behind him. And they're like, and they end up saying, because my phone number was HVAC man, 1-800 HVAC man or some shit like that. And they're like, yeah, that fucking HVAC man guy. And I'm like, yeah, that guy's a fucking asshole. And I started like, I was just behind him talking. And I was like, yeah, he's taking all my work too, joking around. And they're like, yeah, he's a piece of shit. He's lying to people. I'm like, yeah, he must be lying to everybody. And kind of rolled with him for like probably 5 minutes. I was having a conversation with them. I'm like, oh, by the way, that's me. And they're like, what the fuck? And so I started talking to guys, and sure enough, they're like, how'd you do it? And I started talking, they're like, how do you know all this stuff? I'm like, dude, like I said, I'm like a sponge. I learned a lot of these. They're like, no wonder you've grown so fast. I'm like, yeah. And then now I think it was 2 guys, both of them are clients of mine now. So so it's just kind of funny, because people, they can't comprehend something that's bigger than what they can do. And when they can't comprehend it is when they start bashing it or talking shit about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so much easier to be negative and think, just like you said, talk about it and then realize, well, hey, what is he doing?
They all think I'm like, oh, he must be he's got rich parents or something. Like, no, bitch, I've been paying my mom's fucking rent since I was 18. Like, and my dad's dead. My dad fucking got laid off from Home Depot. Like, my dad don't got money. Like I came from nothing, man. Like I didn't have shit. I when I answered that interview in 2015, I drove a 92 Honda Accord that my aunt gave me, broken window on the way to the interview, the fucking rain splattering me in the face. And like I had nothing, dude. Like I came from nothing. We were still like, we'd have to steal the cup of noodles out of the break room and shit during training. Like it was like a 6-week training we had to go through. So yeah. So a lot of people think there's like, oh, he's spoon fed or he's got a backer. I'm like, dude, I guess everything I've done is my own cash. So
that was a great point of when people don't understand, when they can't fathom the success and don't understand it because it's so much bigger than they could ever even imagine, that they think you're cheating in some way. They've got to be like doing something undermining, stealing their customers. Have a golden spoon that there's no way, because they can't comprehend that for themselves or think that big to ever get there themselves, that they think, you've got to be cheating in some way.
Yeah, and it's okay. I kind of like that. I like them to have that idea because it's crazy. Because when people actually they finally meet me for the first time, and I'm like in person, I'm just like I'm an open book. I help people all day long. I mean, you should see my phone. Just like I respond to messages within seconds normally. Like I'm always like I'm trying to help people as much as I can all the time. So people like they just think it's fake, and I'm like, dude, like you should hear some of the calls I'm on. Like people want to give me money. I'm like, I'm not taking your money. Like it doesn't make sense. Like you're not in the position to do that. And when they realize like who I am, then they're like, oh, like I had you completely wrong. And I'm like, yeah, because you don't understand. Like you can't. I try not to judge anybody until I actually meet them and see what they're about.
Yeah, it's too easy to judge, but you're right. I mean, the judge book by its cover, but once they get to know you, you're like, shoot, I was wrong. It would have been so much easier if I came up to you and actually asked you how you did instead of sitting here and thinking that all these things.
I wish I got to do some of the wild shit that I hear about myself. I'm like, whoa, I did that. That's pretty fucking cool. Like, that sounds dope. Like,
oh my gosh, that's a great way to look at it, because the more you put yourself out there, and doing podcasts and events and different things and being in front of the public, that is a great way to look at the stuff when people say things that you've done. Like, man, I wish I would have that.
I had one guy the other day said I was a scam and I never had a big business. And I'm like, do you think that all this stuff, like, I'm like, you can literally go on my Facebook, go back to 2015 or 2018 and watch the whole thing. Like I documented the whole fucking thing, dude. I'm like, there's like, how do you fake fucking 50 trucks in front of me? How do you fake like all my employees in front of me in fucking a meeting? I'm like, you're out of your fucking mind, dude.
So I want to talk about culture, if you don't mind. You seem like a freaking really fun guy, laughing our ass off on the show already. Culture, you either have it or you don't in your business. It's going to kill you, or it's going to make you, and it's going to just be a recruiting magnet for others to want to come work for your company. Can you talk to us about your culture that you had there to able to keep, attract, and retain customer or employees?
Yeah, I mean, obviously being young and obviously charismatic, right? So I mean, I started my business at 30 years old, and I was young, exciting, but I mean, obviously your business evolves, right? Because like in the beginning, like I was working our first 4 months of business, we worked out of a pizza shop parking lot. So we had no office. We did $1 million out of a fucking parking lot in a shitty box truck. And like, we didn't have much, but I always sold my employees, anybody that came to work for me, I said, hey, look, it ain't much now, but this is where we're going. And I said, if you come with me and you trust me now, I will give you an opportunity to be in a management role, a leadership role, and even have equity in this business when we go to sell it. And from day one, I sold everybody on the vision. Right. And when you're small, everybody's like, well, I can't attract talent. I was like, well, your number one goal, if you're tiny, should be figuring out a way to build a business that the talent wants to work for you. So like when I first started my business, like, dude, who the fuck am I going to get myself to come leave my job and come work out of a pizza shop parking lot? No. Okay. I better get a fucking office. Well, would I leave my job to come work for me without benefits? No. Okay. I need to get benefits. Well, I need this. And I started putting all the things in place that would attract A players. And then once I had it, because then they're like, well, you don't have this. You don't have 401k. You don't have, I'm like, I don't have it. Okay, perfect. Let me figure it out. And then I'll get it. And I said, now what's your excuse? Why won't you come work for me? Right. You don't got enough calls. Okay, I got calls. Why won't you come work for me? And I just kept like begging the best guys to come over. And then once you get them in the door, right, you just got to treat them like gold, man. Like my employees, first off, employees want to have direction. So you need to make sure you write out what their job duties are, what their responsibilities are. And you're very, very clear and precise on it. And then obviously from that, just follow up everything you said you're going to do. in the beginning when I first started, there was like, I'd say a lot of shit and then I didn't back it up. And then that caused animosity and then I'll lose an employee. So I said, okay, well, how do we fix that? So we fixed the processes to where it's like every employee understands what their job is, how they get paid. And then obviously we use a lot of bonuses and incentives. Being from a sales background, I use bonuses and incentives throughout every position in my business. Everyone used, like most guys, they bonus their technician or their sales rep. Yeah, I got my call center reps are getting bonuses, my dispatchers, my managers, like everybody involved, my installers all have opportunity to make extra money by being exceptional, right? Being exceptional at your job, you're going to get an extra opportunity to make money. So everybody in my organization made a lot of money. And then I was always transparent and open with everybody, like the good, the bad, the ugly. And, obviously there's some stuff you have to cover, but like for me, I just wanted to make it a place where it's like, they didn't have to question anything. And so I think that was a big part of that. And then also, always like we did a lot of training, a lot of meetings because I wanted to make sure everybody was involved with each other. So like a lot of businesses will departmentalize things. We'll have a call center meeting, then I'll have the tech meeting, I'll have this or whatever. I try to bring everybody together and so that they'll work together better. And I think that was one of the keys to being successful too, is that everybody became friends and everybody wanted everybody to win. And then we always sold the goal. Always, my employees all knew what our budget was, what our goal was, where we were going, where we wanted to be. So they would celebrate like the end of the month. Like they didn't go home. Like my employees would work till fucking midnight if we had you to hit our budget. And that's because we breed that everybody winning together.
Yeah, transparency is so important too. And that's what's going to help keep them with you because you are being transparent, let them know what the vision is, what the goals are. And we're in this together to get to this mission. And
definitely did suck when I sold it and then they fucking fed me a bag of shit and then completely blew my business up. But so they told me one thing and then my business, they went from like, I don't even know how many, they had 40 trucks sitting for like 2 months straight after I sold it. Everybody left because they literally everything they told me they were going to do, they went the opposite.
Oh.
And then now they're, that's on them. I'm trying to Barstool Sports that shit and buy it back for $1, but we'll see.
So what made you sell?
Dude, honestly, so I would say like the last year and a half, my focus had completely left that business. It was too big. It's too much, too many moving pieces. And then I'm so like, obviously I have my training company. I have my other businesses I'm invested in. So I'm making a fuck ton of money over here, but my headaches are over here. And so I'm like, okay, well, why don't I just get rid of this headache, right? Because we were the largest privately held HVAC company in California. So obviously there's still private equity groups that were trying to get into the space. We were the biggest one left. So I was getting offers all the time. And I'm like, okay, I'm spending all this time here when if I can sell this business and I can focus on this other stuff, it's going to do even crazier. So I decided in February, and then by June, we finally got through due diligence and sold it. So, and then I took less money to be able to walk away. So like a lot of deals, they want you to do like they want you to stay on and have an earn out and all that stuff. And I was like, no, what would it take for me just to walk away and not have to deal with it anymore? So took a little bit less money, but for me, it was peace of mind. But don't get me wrong. There was a major depression area after selling your business. Like a lot of people don't really talk about it much. They talk, I got money, I got this. And it's like, no, if you've ever built something of significance and you've had to sell it and now it's not yours anymore, it's fucking weird.
It is. And people don't talk about that. I've been through that. It's like your baby. It's like you birthed this baby and you would never like sell and get rid of a child, right? That wouldn't happen. And with the business, there's part of it that's like that. Obviously, you made a decision to focus your energy in other places, and it's a great thing. But there is that emotional thing that you have to go through that I think feels similar to that. I just let go of a child.
It was probably 2 months. Like I didn't realize I was depressed until like I stayed at the beach house for like a month straight, didn't do shit, didn't leave, just went on and walked out of the beach every day. And finally my friends were like, dude, what are you doing? I'm like, I don't know, dude. I'm like, I didn't want to see. And then I already knew what was going on internally with my business. Like the failures that were already started to happen. And my employees that I brought in and built up were like, they're starting to like, hey, dude, like, what are you doing? Why'd you do this? Like, fuck, come back, please, God. Like, so it was definitely a depressing thing. And then I have to drive by it every day. So like, my business, we were the biggest business in the city that I live in. So like, I think that was something that I was always proud of because I grew up here. So I'm like, now I have the biggest business in the city I grew up in. But yeah, it was definitely every day driving by there and then seeing the truck sitting and all this stuff. And then I can't and then they didn't want me to come in because they're like, you're such a polarizing figure that they won't listen to us if you come in. So they kind of pretty much the second the deal went through, they were already cleared out my office. I'm like, fuck. So it's definitely weird.
So what do you have going on now? I mean, you talked about the show you put on last year. You're doing another one this year. Let's talk about that real quick.
Yeah. So about 4 years ago, I started getting into the event space. And it's kind of grown since then. And in 2020, I threw my first event during COVID. Everything was shut down. So I threw a 100-person event in my parking lot. And so that was kind of the first event we ever did. I'm like, okay, we had 100 people here. And I said, okay, well, the next one I want to do in Vegas. So we ended up having 400 people in Vegas. We had Grant Cardone there, Brandon Dawson, Tommy Mello, all these people. This was in 2021. And so I kind of fell in love with the event space. My whole life, I've always liked to throw parties. And I was always that's just what I've always been around. My house was the party house growing up and shit. So, I've always been really into it. And then it just got exciting. I love speaking. I love helping people. So, we grew our first one. And then, the next year we did Vegas. We had about, 800, 900 people there in Vegas. And that event went great. And we just wrapped up our third event here in Austin in, September. We had about 1,200 people at that one. Tim Grover and some Marcus Luttrell and a bunch. I mean, we just had a bunch of big names, a bunch of people that were at that event. But it's been growing like crazy, and now we're starting to get to where the vendors that are coming in. We had one of our vendors actually paid for Rick Ross to show up for this one. So in May we have Rick Ross playing the after party, and now we're getting we have so many just big vendors and people that want to get involved with what we're doing that it's starting to get crazy. So we're expecting about 2,000 people in Dallas in May. Lineups, if you're in the home service space, we have everybody from garage door guys, roofers, solar guys, obviously HVAC, plumbing, electrical. Pretty much anybody in the trades will get something out of this event. And what we're known for is throwing not just the people on the stage, but the after party. So we always do crazy ass. I mean, I spent $1 million last year just on food and beverage for the after parties. So we go a little wild, go a little over the top, but I had a long-term play because I've never made money on an event. I've only lost money. We lost $100,000 the first year, then $400,000, and then $1 million last year. But this will be the first one where we should actually make some money and be able to actually enjoy it. But we went I wanted to grow an event fast, so you have to go all out and get people excited and get people talking about it. And so that's what we did for the last couple of years. And now hopefully we can recoup that money and not be losing our ass every year.
Go big or go home, though. Like you said, you want to get such the ultimate experience for people that everyone's talking about it. And
I'm not feeding you. I'm not feeding you box lunches and shit. We had tomahawk steaks and it was nuts, dude. It was pretty dope.
Where can our viewers go find out more information about that?
If you want to go to the event, go to callprofitrocket.com. Look it up. Rocket X is the event. It's May 1st through 3rd in Dallas. I got Dak Prescott and Zeke will be there. A bunch of industry names. I got over $2 billion worth of yearly revenue, owners that are to be on stage. So you have billions of dollars of knowledge that are going to be there. And then on top of that, the after party with Rick Ross, and we have some other stuff that we're planning as well that we haven't announced yet. Tickets are almost sold out. We probably only have 200 left or something like that. So tickets are almost sold out. But if you go to callprofitrocket.com, you can get signed up today.
That's awesome. Well, Victor, this is probably the most I've laughed during one of episodes. So I appreciate that. I love laughing, love humor. I love you being, very transparent and talking about the good and the bad. And congrats to your success. I mean, that's one for the books for sure. And we wish you tons of luck with everything else. And we're probably going to be getting tickets to your show because
I'm gonna have to check yours out too. But yeah, I mean, if you're an entrepreneur out there, you're listening to this, and you're going through some rough times, just know that the only way you lose is if you quit, and things do get better. But just don't do it alone. That's the one thing I would stress is, don't stress alone, man. Talk to somebody, reach out to somebody, reach out to me, reach out to guessing JC and Angela. You can reach out to them as well. Sometimes it takes a third person's perspective to realize what's really going on and be able to help you through it. So don't suffer alone. Make some phone calls, and I guarantee that someone else has already been through what you're going through, and they can help you get through it. So that would be my challenge to anybody that's listening to this that's struggling right now.
What a powerful way to end this episode. Yes. Victor, thank you so much. And to our viewers, that's another episode of In the Foxhole. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share, and we'll see you next week.
See you guys.